Hi, my name's Abby. I'm a member of the class of 2023, and during the summer of 2021, I did a research project with Kristen Watkins from the computer science department, where I learned how to build a mobile app using Xcode and the programming language Swift. And thank you all for coming to my CSA Day presentation. So the general idea for my project was that I wanted to create an app that simplifies the process of creating a Dungeons and Dragons character. Why? Because I love D&D. And currently there are no apps on the market that actually do this. And to be honest, it's really difficult to get into D&D because of the character creation process. When you're creating a character in D&D, you need to use this book, the Player's Handbook, and 172 pages out of it are what you need to read to successfully understand your options and create a character in D&D. That's kind of a lot to ask of somebody who's trying to just experiment and learn a new game. So I thought it would be really easy to create an application that allowed the facilitation of this process to be much simpler and easier. Some fun statistics about my project was that I had over 52 pieces of instantiated data and over 3,000 lines of code by the end of my project. So what do you need to know about D&D before I get into what my project was and my process? So basically D&D is a tabletop role-playing game where people play as characters in the D&D world. So basically think Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, there's magic, you can cast spells, and there's magical creatures like elves. A tabletop role-playing game is just a game where you pretend to be somebody else, basically, and you use game pieces on the table and dice to make decisions and facilitate role-playing. So what types of characters can you play in D&D? When creating a character, the two main topics of your character and the main aspects of your character are their race and class. Race is basically, are you an elf? Are you a gnome? Are you a human? And your class is kind of what job you do in D&D. Examples would be bard, the entertainer of the group, or fighter, master of weaponry, those kind of things. So for this project, I was working with a couple different tools and languages. The main language or programming language I was trying to learn for this project is Swift, which is Apple's proprietary programming language. I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but basically Swift is an object-oriented programming language. If you've ever heard of Java or Python or PHP, basically it allows you to compartmentalize and transfer data more easily. Xcode is their interface, or which is Apple's integrated development environment. So that's just the interface you use to program in Swift and create mobile applications for them. So I thought I'd also talk a little bit about my process of my application and how I developed it. So what I started with, of course, was creating a plan. There's a lot to learn about mobile application development and about Swift and Xcode, and I kind of wanted to focus in on my scope because I only had 8 weeks to complete this project. So the first step in my planning was to create a UI/UX plan. UI/UX stands for user interface, user experience. So this is kind of like what I would need to have the user be able to use and for the full functionality of this project. Then I started researching and learning the mobile app development process, Xcode, and Swift as well. Then I needed to figure out how to organize all 172 pages of this so that it would be manageable for my application. Once I figured out how to organize the data and what I wanted to do and what the most important pieces of that data were, I wanted to build a framework that I could host that data in. Those are all the different app pages and panels that you might need when navigating an application that you're using on your phone. Then, of course, I needed to integrate that data into that framework that I built, and then I needed to finalize the application. So like I said, the first step was building a UI/UX plan. I used an application called Miro to do this. Basically, my main idea was that there would be kind of two sides to the app. One where you could view your character and view all the information that you need to know when playing D&D, and one for character creation that would walk you through the character creation process in a very simplified manner. So as you can see, you can like enter your name, and then you can open a submenu for classes and a submenu for races, as well as select your alignment and enter your background information and roll your stats. So it'll do all the mathematical calculations from all that data for you, because a lot of D&D character creation is in fact math. Then on the other side, you can just view all the information about your character that you selected and created in the other side. The next part of my project was, of course, learning Swift and Xcode. Honestly, it was quite difficult to learn Xcode. I could not find a whole bunch of relevant information because it gets updated constantly. So I ended up reading a lot of online forums to do this and found that following YouTube tutorials was the easiest way to do this. Learning Swift was relatively easy. I think it took me about 2 hours. It's kind of like once you know how to write formal English, you can figure out text speak. It's just a slightly different vocabulary. So once I had kind of figured out what I wanted to do and figure out all the tools I needed, I started coding. The first thing I did was code all that data that I had figured out how to categorize and organize, and creating classes, which are how you categorize data pieces in an object-oriented programming language. And then I created examples of those classes to use as my data pieces themselves. And that was all done in Swift, Apple's proprietary programming language. And then I started building the actual mobile application itself, which would be all the frames and different pieces that the user would interact with and see. This was definitely the most tedious part of the project. As you can see, this is label 25 at the bottom of the screen. So it just takes a long time to physically create and type out all the information you need to create an application itself. Then I'm going to walk you through a really short demo. It's about 3 minutes long. And as you can see, this is a synthesized phone on my computer that I could use through Xcode. So as you can see, there's two simple buttons. This one is where we wanted to view the character. These are the presets I set up. And now we're going to go into edit character. So I'm decided for this demo purpose just to build myself as a D&D character. It's pretty straightforward. And then I'm going to show you and walk you through the classes. So as you can see, there's different stats and bonuses to each class. So that was Bard, and now we're going to look at Paladin. You can see the proficiency bonus is the same, but the hit points are slightly different. So there's all kinds of different little things you can do to edit your character and have different strengths and weaknesses for your character when you're playing D&D. And that's why it's 172 pages of a book, but it can be really straightforward. So you just, and then now we're looking at races. So there's different benefits to different races as well. Tieflings, as you can see, have a +1 intelligence bonus. I think now I'm going to look at humans who are well-rounded but don't have a lot of special skills. I selected human, of course, because I'm a human. Now I'm going to look at my alignment. This just is your morality in D&D. I selected lawful good. I generally try to follow the law and be a good person. Now I selected my background menu, and I'm going to go into my personality traits. This is just a text box entry. When you're creating a physical D&D character, IRL, it's actually on a physical piece of paper where you would hand write in what your personality traits are. People tend to go really in depth with their background information, so I just kind of wanted to give the user free reign and have text boxes for those data pieces. So I'm just walking through kind of my generic information about my character. And as you can see, the bar is actually kind of far up the screen. That is because in a traditional phone, the keyboard would appear at the bottom of the screen. But as I was synthesizing this phone on a computer, the keyboard is just on my computer, so you don't need to see the pop-up keyboard. I couldn't add a lot of prettiness to this application because I was still trying to figure out the bare bones. And when you don't pay for a developer package with Apple, they don't give you all the color options. So you only have the presets, and none of the preset colors other than grayscale looked decent together. So that's why it's a little bit drab. However, now I'm just going to enter my backstory, and then we'll be finishing up the backstory portion of the background portion of my character. So the first time I did this and gave this demo was for my Austin scholarship, which is where I got the grant funding to do this project. And so I wrote my demo and based my demo based on that presentation that I was giving then. Now I'm going to click on roll stats. In D&D, like I said earlier, is a dice-based game. So your stats are kind of like the attributes of your character. So in D&D, you roll a d20, which is a 20-sided dice, and it gives you all these stats and information about your character. Now I'm going to go and show you all that data we changed about the character, and you should see it in this menu here. You can see that my name is Abby, that my class is a fighter, that I'm lawful good, that I'm a human. Now I'm going to go and really quickly change my class from fighter to wizard. I'm going to try to pause it on time because I ended this demo a little bit too early when I was giving it, so you can't really see it well. But as you can maybe see for a half a second there, I changed it to wizard successfully. So yeah, as you can see, that was pretty fast versus reading 172 pages would take quite a while. Even with a D&D expert, it usually takes a while to build a character. So thank you so much for coming to my presentation. I am likely standing by ready to answer any questions you have.